I guess in light of, Sydney and New South Wales's growing numbers and outbreaks, and I guess this continual perpetual lockdown cycle that we're all in. Obviously, we're still here. I wouldn't be surprised if Victoria is still going to be in lockdown for quite some time, even though there's much fewer cases here. But I guess because lockdowns have been such an ongoing thing for the past 18 months now, I guess, or thereabouts, people are getting weary, people are getting tired, and I think there's a political narrative shaping now around how do we get past this? How do we, get through to the other side? And I guess we spoke about this in recent episodes about the 70-80% vaccination rate target that the government announced and all of that. And but now the interesting thing is this sort of emphasis now on living with the virus that's coming into the narrative as a way to prepare people for the fact that this is actually going to happen, which, is inevitable. Like that was the whole reasoning for setting those targets in the first place, because, 20% is still a big number of people that are unvaccinated. And if they're not vaccinated and they're more likely to spread the virus, it still means there's going to be high case numbers. So I guess it was inevitable that the narrative had to change at some point.
Oh, I guess that's right, and that's also bearing in mind that 1 in 3 people vaccinated will likely still contract the disease, albeit they're far less likely to end up in hospital. But they can contract the disease and potentially spread it. So, at 70 or 80%, depending on how that looks like and what numbers are, will determine whether or not restrictions are reduced in these circumstances. But I think that there's a lot of work going on at the moment with people modelling and trying to work out what 70 or 80% of how many or who these people are and what that would look like with viruses moving through a population with high caseloads and also low caseloads.
It doesn't help that the messaging is confused because, it sounds like 70 or 80%, whatever number you want to pick. That sounds like an easy number to understand. But I think for the layperson, they think that means everybody. But that doesn't necessarily mean everybody in the context of the narrative that's coming out, because we're talking about eligible people being vaccinated, which actually brings the number back down to anywhere between 50 and 60% of real world numbers. And then an interpretation of what that means. So some might want to go 8 to 70 or 80% of real world numbers as opposed to eligible people that can be vaccinated, etc. And that's kind of adding a bit of grist to the arguments that are happening between, government levels, at, health professional levels, whatever it is. It's just becoming very difficult and messy.
Well, yeah, I think considering it appeared, I can't remember when, 4 to 6 weeks ago, that the states and the federal government had reached some sort of agreement around 70 or 80%. A lot of the statements we're hearing now from some of the premiers and some of the actions we're seeing taken and situations we're seeing emerge would suggest that everyone has a different idea of what 70 or 80% is. What the pathway out of this might be, and what a future without restrictions actually means. Because some people have hinted also that 70-80% restrictions may in some instances be no different to today, and others have suggested that they could be, no restrictions at all. So it is very confusing.
And it's the re-emergence of the Doherty Institute as the ones that did the modelling, that provided these things and or provided the sort of framework, I'd call it an initial framework for discussion more than anything else, because modelling is just modelling, and they didn't necessarily take into account every possible scenario that could be happening. When I'll have to remember what the time frame was, but I think when that last round of modelling came out, the case numbers in New South Wales were far lower than what they are now. So it may have seemed more reasonable. Whatever was presented was doable in that sense. But with much higher case numbers, there might be a different discussion that has to be had.
Oh, you're right, and that's really interesting. Nobody's told us when that modelling was last done. On the one hand, we've got a lot more information now, particularly from Britain, about the virus and the spread of Delta. So you would expect the modelling to be quite accurate, but variables in Australia, and it's a different environment, different climate, different population densities, different population demographics, all of these things add up, and then the caseload numbers underneath all of that determines how quickly the virus can spread. So, as we've seen in New South Wales, 2-3 weeks makes a huge amount of difference. So, what can be, fresh modelling and accurate on Monday, by Monday week can be, starting to be a little bit old.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can only hope that we get a bit more sort of information around this sort of stuff, and that maybe the governments work with the people, obviously some of whom are getting restless and tired of being locked down, work us through and take us to where we're going. But we've heard about vaccination passports and advantages for those vaccinated. We still haven't got any idea of what they are, when they're going to happen or how they're going to work. And we're seeing states still bickering and, basically taking their own approaches. So it's very difficult to know what we should be thinking.
Well, it's going to be an interesting couple of months leading to the end of the year, to say the least.